Hello, this is a science fiction story called The Martian Election of 2120. Nobody could be just a restaurant owner on Mars. There was too much work to do. Tom Franklin's place, the Green Dragon Pub, was closed until lunch. He was working in the halls outside it, inspecting pipes and wiring. "What are you up to, Tom?" said a man in a splendid black and red uniform. He was flanked by two humanoid security bots. "Just keeping us alive, Mr. The man said, "Regis, may I come in for a drink?" Tom said, "We're not open yet, but I'll oblige you if you leave the Tin Man out." One of the robots displayed a scowl on his facial screen. Tom unlocked the pub and let Regis in. The guest sighed. "That's the sort of language you need to tone down, but that's not why I'm here. I'll have a whiskey." Tom walked behind the faux wood counter and poured him one, and water for himself. All around them the pub provided an illusion of distant Earth, with living bamboo plants and monitors showing beaches. He let Regis take a seat on a bar stool and said, "So, what brings you?" Regis pointed to a sign on the wall. In bold orange letters it said, "President Cuprum, 1." Regis said, "We need that gone. You're spreading socially harmful misinformation." Tom shrugged. "Hey, you guys have taken power, so you can believe and say whatever you like. I just want the same rights." "Of course you have the right to your beliefs, sir, but these are false, objectively, scientifically debunked. You don't seriously think there was fraud, do you?" Tom looked him in the eye and said, "The Martian election of the year 2120 was a fraud." Regis said, "What led you to such a conspiracy theory? Who fed you this delusion?" Tom slid his water glass aside and started writing on a napkin. "There are a couple of problems. First of all, there was the outright criminal fraud. In Colony Sector G, for instance, there was a report of a water main break. The official vote observers were sent away and told that counting was done for the night, and then the counters stuck around and pulled out boxes of ballots from under tables. They resumed counting, and gosh, those votes ran against President Cuprum and in favor of candidate Wu." "That was debunked," Regis said. "Really? There's video of it, and there was reporting about the water main, and a follow-up report that it was just a clogged toilet. And it so happens that Wu suddenly got a ton of votes after hours during the illegal counting. Just enough to make Sector G his. Or we could look at Colony Sector P, where observers were blocked. I forget. Was that the one where the counters actually put up cardboard on the windows to prevent people from seeing what was happening? There was trouble in Sectors M and W and maybe even A, too. Was there ever a case where there was some kind of late-night halt to the counting and then counting resumed, and then the votes went to Cuprum instead of Wu? I'm pretty sure it was all one way." Regis shrugged. "The Equality Party tends to attract smart voters who cast their ballots later, that's all. Just because you support the Liberty Party, you shouldn't be a sore loser." "I'm not actually a big fan of the Liberty Party," said Tom. "They're mostly worthless. But President Cuprum stood out like a wrecking ball. That's why he got my vote." Regis said, "And in our fragile Martian city, you think a wrecking ball is what we need? This sort of talk is a threat to our democracy." "Less so than fraud," said Tom. "Now, so far I've only talked about the most obviously illegal stuff. But there were plenty of other shenanigans. Some of that's illegal, too. Did you know, for instance, that a lot of the votes in certain sectors don't have the legally required chain of custody info? In other words, those are legally invalid ballots. They shouldn't have been counted. But you counted them anyway." Tom scribbled another note on the napkin. "And then there's the matter of the colony sectors violating their own local laws. In Sector P, for instance, they had specific laws in place about voting. Sector officials arbitrarily decided, all by themselves, that they were going to alter the rules for this election." Regis shrugged again. "We had that space rat infestation to deal with. We had to make special provisions." Tom said, "In other words, the officials decided the laws were too inconvenient and broke them without any legal authority. And gosh, these changes favored Wu and the Equality Party. So, we have outright fakery, and we have sector officials breaking laws." Regis said, "So you're a conspiracy theorist who buys into that nonsense about secret messages for the Quasar people?" Tom laughed at him. "I know practically nothing about the Quasar thing. It's probably a psyop by you guys. but I don't really care and I'm not relying on it. Tom went on, third point. Besides the outright criminal fraud, you guys used large donations from the likes of the Xandroid Corporation to set up special voting boxes and other voting programs in very specific areas where there wasn't much scrutiny. That's perfectly legal. We were trying to increase turnout. Sure, assuming no special bonus votes stuck into the boxes, and that there were no fake registrations. By the way, there were a bunch of people officially voting from addresses in empty hallways and entirely fictional habitat domes. Where did you even see that? We just asked. Had to find it on an alternative news site. Mars Video censored the report on the addresses on the grounds that it was releasing dangerous personal information. So a fictional guy casts a vote from literally an empty crater, and Mars Video says that the voter would be endangered by people knowing his supposed address. So now you're complaining about private businesses choosing to use discretion in what content they allow. I thought the Liberty Party liked free enterprise. Your taunt is noted, said Tom. Can you name me one major Martian institution that hasn't signed on to the doctrine that Wu won legitimately, and that anybody who says otherwise is probably a terrorist and shouldn't be allowed to talk? I mean, name any prominent corporation, branch of government, school, church, social club, anybody at all. When all the institutions speak in unison, that's creepy. It's a sign that something's seriously wrong. Regis smacked the bar counter. But your people did commit terrorism. A violent mob raided the government plaza in an attempt to overthrow the government and install your tyrant. Tom took a drink. Tell me, in your own words, what was that mob trying to do? I said, overthrow the government, because Kupram told them to invade and take over, and to murder council members, probably chosen by race. That's a complete lie, but go on. How many people did they kill? We just said, 5, I believe. 5 people. Tom made a buzzing sound. Wrong. A couple of the protesters died of medical problems. One protester, an unarmed female veteran, died when your cops shot her. By the way, what was that officer's name? Why hasn't it been released? Why isn't he being put on trial? We just said, the terrorist mob killed a police officer, bashed him with a fire extinguisher. No, that got reported, and it sounded bad, but the news quietly retracted that claim. You Equality Party people spent last year shouting slogans like, quote, all cops are bastards, and, quote, abolish the police. You're still saying it. But for this one shining moment, this one cop was a hero to you. So the mob killed 0 people. 0. Did they set the building on fire? Because your buddies set multiple sectors on fire last year, repeatedly, and you actively cheered that. And we're talking about Mars, you know, where fire is extra dangerous. Regis had grown red-faced. Your terrorist mob was trying to seize power by force. If so, they were also really badly armed and weirdly polite about it. Didn't smash any statues like your friends keep doing all over the colony. Why do you guys hate Neil Armstrong so much, anyway? I don't hate him. He was just an oppressor, and he shouldn't have statues. Tom whistled. I'm impressed. Now, I also want to get into how your captive media buried that negative story about Wu's crackhead son and his crooked business deals, and how the same media kept repeating a lie that Kupram said, I like to stab puppies, when it was an easily disproven fake quote. First of all, we just interrupted him. You people tried to litigate this crazy theory of yours about supposed fraud. You had your day in court and you lost, repeatedly. Tom said, yes, the courts repeatedly dismissed the cases on the grounds that we had no standing, or it was too late to sue, or some other reason why there was no need to look at the evidence. How the hell does President Kupram not have standing to go to the High Court of Mars to challenge a sector violating its own laws to hurt him? I mean, if the High Court had taken the case and ultimately said all our sworn testimony and so on is bunk, that would have been one thing. But as things stand, we're told we have to accept Wu on the grounds of, shut up, you're not allowed to question it. You lost, Regis repeated. Tom scoffed. Anyway, it looks like I'm not going to convince you of anything, but that's what the problem is. Some of it, anyway. There's some deeper problems I don't want to get into here. I wanted to talk about this stuff more openly, but the news agencies and social networks have banned any discussion of it. The big radio network outright said they'd fire any host who brought it up. Isn't that kind of creepy? Regis wrung his hands. For good reason. Don't you see that this subversive talk is dangerous to our democracy? The President of Mars needs to have the support of the Martian people. It's time to come together and heal and have some unity after such a contentious and dark year. Tom said, You spent the last several years having every media institution scream in unison that people like me are demons from hell. It was just the other day the council leader gave a speech comparing President Coupram and all his supporters, including me, to space pirate Mongo the Cruel. Regis said, We can't have unity until the subversive talk stops. Tom said, The beatings will continue until morale improves, huh? Hey, here's a data point for you. About 1/3 of the Martian population says the Martian election of 2120 was a fraud, rigged, illegitimate, fake. I've seen this stat in multiple polls, even from pro-Wu sources, with various question wording. Fact is, this belief isn't going to go away just because you keep saying it's a lie and because you've outlawed it. Regis said, But it's wrong, false, debunked. Why do you persist? Tom said, Well, you could try addressing our concerns in some way, like we were fellow citizens and you cared about us. Maybe try enacting some election reforms. But instead, so far, you proposed a bill to actually remove what safeguards we have now. And you propose to grant full citizenship to the Phobos and Deimos moon bases so that you get extra guaranteed votes for the Equality Party. We don't need your racist, oppressive attempts at reform. We need progress. We need men like you to accept this defeat and move on. Join us, Tom. Heal the planet. Tom said, Without any attempt at reform, the only heel is the one on your boot on our necks, and we're going to get tired of it. What happens then, I'm not sure. But a lot of people will get the idea they can't protect their freedom by voting. Regis stood and stretched, pushing his empty glass aside. That's it, then. I'm sorry to hear you can't be reasoned with. You won't take down the sign? You won't start challenging customers who spread these terrible falsehoods about President Wu? No. Regis smiled sadly. Sorry to hear it. Your restaurant has several health code violations, by the way. I found, rats in the kitchen just now. I have this conversation recorded, Tom said. No one will hear it. Good day to you, Tom. I was polite today, but we're just getting started. The government man nodded and walked out of the pub. Tom, alone, drummed his fingers on the counter. He, too, had potential moves in the game ahead. The question was which ones he dared to use and how to make sure other people knew of the need for them. This has been a reading of a science fiction story. I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye for now.